The views and opinions expressed on the following program are those of the program host and guests, and do not necessarily represent the views of Western Carolina University or radio station WWCU.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Sports Craziest Stories and Conspiracies podcast, the sports podcast that gets you behind the scenes of sports and gives you an in-depth look at some of the craziest stories the sports world has ever given us. I am your host, Corey Scroggs, and I will be your only voice today as my partner, JR, unfortunately could not be here today. So, getting into it, today is our first episode of Sports Craziest Stories and Conspiracies, and we're going to kick things off by starting out with a conspiracy that saved Cal Ripken Jr.'s consecutive games played streak. Now, for those of you that don't know who Cal Ripken Jr. is, he is a Hall of Fame third baseman that played for the Baltimore Orioles from 1981 until 2001. Very long time. Now, he is well known for being an excellent hitter and an excellent defender, but he is better known for his record of consecutive games played of 2,632. Previously, a record held by Lou Gehrig. The Baltimore Orioles baseball team was not very successful in wins and losses, so they very much depended on Ripken and his quote-unquote Iron Man streak, is what they called it, to bring in fans and bring in more money for the team, because this was a streak held by Lou Gehrig, and his consecutive games was 2,130, and no one ever thought this streak would be beat, so it was a big moneymaker for the Orioles, and without Ripken and his streak, there would have been a drastic drop in attendance and money being brought into the team, etc. And that's why many people believe that the Orioles would do and did do anything to keep that streak alive. This is where the story gets really interesting to me, because on August 14th, 1997, the Seattle Mariners came to Baltimore to play, and Ripken's streak was still going, still intact, and everything's great. They're going to pack the seats again, like usual. But the only problem was that Cal Ripken Jr. was nowhere to be found. And this really gets really interesting. But luckily for Cal Ripken and the Orioles, I would say, the game was never played that night due to a quote-unquote power outage at the park. So you might be wondering to yourself, where was Cal Ripken Jr.? Why wasn't he at the game? What was going on? And the story goes that Ripken left his house on August 14th to go to the game like he normally does, and then he had to turn around because he forgot his duffel bag, which had some of his equipment that he uses for the games in it. And when Ripken arrived back at his house, he found his wife, Kelly Ripken, in bed with another man. And, oh, by the way, this man was not just any average Joe. It was actually world-famous, award-winning actor Kevin Costner. When Cal caught the two in bed, he was furious. Rightfully so, right? I mean, any man, woman would be very upset if they caught their significant other in the bed with another person. And he supposedly attacked Costner and ended up being arrested due to the incident. So this made the Orioles panic, and they freaked out. They had to come up with a way to try to somehow keep Ripken's streak alive for both of their sake. So what did they do? They cut the main power cords to the stadium and canceled the game for the night due to the power outage. Now, almost everything I just said is a complete conspiracy, right? And it is up to your judgment whether you believe it or not. But it is very interesting, and there are some facts that could add validity to the story. Like the fact that Kevin Costner had just become a very good friend of the Ripken family, even involving Costner going to the park with Cal to take batting practice before a couple games. So they were very close. But now we get back to the power outage part. So the stadium is packed with fans waiting to see Ripken, and it just so happened that no other part of Baltimore was affected by this power outage. That, to me, is a good indicator that they shut their own power off. And then it took the workers almost 2 hours working on the power outage and to tell the fans that the game's going to be canceled and they're going to have to go home and they'll have to, get their tickets refunded and all that stuff. To me, it sounds like a very smooth way of the Orioles just trying to get Ripken out of jail and to the stadium in time so they could turn the power back on and play the game and keep his streak going without a problem and not upsetting all their fans. So while all that stuff supports the conspiracy, there are also reports that also contradict the conspiracy, like with some sports writers for the Orioles saying that Ripken was warming up at the game that night. They saw him. Some fans saying they saw him. And then other people say that there's no way that Ripken would have played in the next day's game if he had been arrested. So, due to the fact that the team would punish him and suspend him. And now, personally, I don't believe that the Orioles would have suspended him because that would make no sense, because that would have ended the streak that was bringing them so much money and great attendance and relevancy that they were trying to keep going no matter what. So, of course, both Ripken and Costner have been asked about the situation, and of course, both men wholeheartedly denied the conspiracy and said there was no truth to it at all. And Costner even went as far to say that himself and Cal Ripken's wife, Kelly Ripken, they've only spoke to each other a couple times in their lifetimes. This is probably not true because there's literal proof that Costner and Kelly Ripken had been spotted watching the Oriole games several times while sitting next to each other in the front row. And that, to me, again, that's another sign that supports the conspiracy. Despite the denials by the two stars, this theory has been around on the internet for a very long time, and it does seem to be easy to believe this theory and this conspiracy. Costner, he was a well-known womanizer in Hollywood, and that would also lead me to think that he would be capable of doing something like that. And then around the same time, there were rumors that the Ripkens' marriage was failing, and all of this just adds up to a nice, juicy conspiracy that, in my opinion, is probably truthful. But at the end of the day, it's up to you on whether or not this crazy story is a real conspiracy or if it's just people trying to make excuses and trying to tarnish an incredible record that probably will never be broken. And with that, that is all for the first episode of Sports' Craziest Stories and Conspiracies podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. I mean, Hall of Fame baseball player Cal Ripken Jr., a record streak that will probably never be broken, an Oscar-winning actor, Kevin Costner, a mysterious power outage, and just, that is one crazy story. Or is it a conspiracy? You be the judge. Thank you so much for listening to the Sports Craziest Stories and Conspiracies podcast, episode 1. We hope you tune in next week to hear our next crazy story or conspiracy.